The police sirens pierced through the afternoon calm of Maplewood Elementary, like knives through silk. Mrs. Chen's fingers froze over the piano keys as 3 patrol cars screeched into the school parking lot, their red and blue lights painting frantic shadows across the music room windows. 27 third graders, dressed in their best concert attire, stood motionless on the risers, their mouths still shaped around the words of "This land is your land" that had died in their throats. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." Officer Martinez's voice boomed through the hallway as heavy footsteps approached. Mrs. Chen's heart hammered against her ribs. She had been teaching music at Maplewood for 8 years, had seen countless students discover their voices in this very room, had built a reputation for creating magic through melody. Now, the magic felt like it was crumbling around her. The music room door burst open with such force that the framed photographs of past concerts rattled against the wall. 3 officers entered, hands resting on their weapons, eyes scanning the room with the intensity of soldiers entering a battlefield. Behind them trailed Principal Henderson, his usually composed face flushed with confusion and concern. "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the children," Officer Martinez said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that made even the bravest 8-year-old shrink back. "We've received a report of suspicious activity." Mrs. Chen's legs felt like water beneath her, but she forced herself to remain steady. "I don't understand. We were just rehearsing for tonight's concert. These children have been working for months." "Step away from the piano, please." The second officer, a woman with steel-gray eyes, moved closer. "We need to investigate claims that you've been using inappropriate methods to influence these children." The words hit Mrs. Chen like physical blows. Around her, 27 pairs of young eyes began to fill with tears. Little Emma Rodriguez, who had finally conquered her stage fright just last week, began to sob quietly. Marcus Thompson, the boy who had discovered he could sing alto and had been so proud of his solo, backed against the wall as if trying to disappear. "What inappropriate methods?" Mrs. Chen's voice cracked. "These children have been learning songs about America, about diversity, about friendship. We've been preparing America the Beautiful. What a wonderful world. Songs that celebrate our community." "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us." Officer Martinez reached for his handcuffs, and the sound of metal clicking echoed through the room like a death knell. Several children began crying openly now, their voices creating a heartbreaking chorus that no sheet music could have ever captured. 6 hours earlier, the morning had begun with such promise. Mrs. Chen had arrived at school before sunrise, her arms full of costumes that parents had lovingly sewn, her mind buzzing with excitement about the evening's performance. The Harmony Around the World concert had been her passion project, a celebration of the diverse cultures that made Maplewood Elementary so special. Students would perform songs in Spanish, Mandarin, Hebrew, and Arabic, alongside American classics, showing how different melodies could blend into something beautiful together. She had spent the weekend putting finishing touches on the program, arranging flowers for the stage, coordinating with parent volunteers who would help with lighting and sound. The children had been practicing for 3 months, and their growth had been remarkable. Shy students had found their voices, troublemakers had discovered discipline through rhythm, and the entire 3rd grade had formed bonds that transcended the usual playground cliques. But Karen Whitmore had been watching. Karen, whose son Tyler had auditioned for a solo in What a Wonderful World, and hadn't been selected. Karen, whose repeated complaints about the foreign songs had been politely dismissed by Principal Henderson. Karen, who had spent the last month attending every rehearsal with a notepad, scribbling observations that she claimed were concerning. At precisely 2:47 p.m., while Mrs. Chen was helping little Aisha adjust her dress for the Arabic lullaby she would be singing, Karen had dialed 911 from her minivan in the school parking lot. "Yes, I need to report suspicious activity at Maplewood Elementary," she had said, her voice trembling with manufactured urgency. "There's an Asian teacher here who's been brainwashing our children. She's making them sing in foreign languages, teaching them to reject American values. I think she might be indoctrinating them. The children seem different, confused. You need to get here immediately." The 911 operator, trained to take all calls seriously, especially those involving children, had dispatched units immediately. Within minutes, the peaceful afternoon at Maplewood Elementary had transformed into a scene from a nightmare. Now, as Mrs. Chen felt the cold metal of handcuffs around her wrists, she looked into the faces of her students and saw their world crashing down. "Children, everything is going to be okay," she said, though her voice betrayed her own doubt. "Remember what we talked about. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that doesn't change the beauty of what we've created together." Principal Henderson stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "Officers, I can assure you that Mrs. Chen is one of our most dedicated teachers. These allegations are completely unfounded. She's been preparing these children for a multicultural concert that celebrates American diversity." "Sir, we have to investigate all reports involving potential harm to children," Officer Martinez replied, though his expression suggested he was beginning to have doubts about the situation. The caller was very specific about inappropriate influence and anti-American activities. As Mrs. Chen was led from the room, 27 children watched their beloved teacher disappear down the hallway like a criminal. The concert costumes hung abandoned on their tiny bodies. The sheet music scattered across the floor like broken dreams. Emma Rodriguez's sobs grew louder, and soon the entire room was filled with the sound of children crying for reasons they couldn't understand. Within an hour, word of the incident had spread through the Maplewood community like wildfire. Parents rushed to the school, demanding answers. Social media exploded with speculation and rumors. The local news station sent a reporter, and by evening, the story of the suspicious music teacher was trending on Twitter. Karen Whitmore watched the chaos unfold from her living room, a satisfied smile playing across her lips. She had called 3 of her closest friends within minutes of making the 911 call, ensuring that her version of events would be the first to circulate through the parent network. "I just couldn't stand by and watch that woman poison our children's minds," she told anyone who would listen. "Teaching them foreign songs, making them question American values. Someone had to protect our kids." But Karen had underestimated the Maplewood community. As news of Mrs. Chen's detention spread, parents began to speak up. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother, was the first to call Principal Henderson. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Mrs. Chen helped my daughter overcome her fear of singing. She taught Emma that her voice matters, that her culture is something to be proud of. If anything, she's been teaching these kids to be better Americans by understanding what that really means." Dr. James Thompson, Marcus's father and a local pediatrician, was equally outraged. "My son has been coming home for months, talking about the songs they're learning, about how different cultures contribute to American society. Mrs. Chen has been teaching them history, compassion, and acceptance. Whoever made this call has done tremendous damage to our children and our community." By 9 o'clock that evening, nearly 40 parents had called the school district demanding Mrs. Chen's immediate release and reinstatement. the school board convened an emergency meeting, reviewing footage from the music room security cameras and interviewing students who could articulate what they had been learning. The evidence was overwhelming. Video after video showed Mrs. Chen working patiently with students, teaching them about the historical significance of different songs, helping them understand how America's strength came from its diversity. The foreign songs that Karen had complained about were carefully chosen to represent the heritage of students in the class, with detailed explanations of how immigrant communities had contributed to American culture. 8-year-old Lily Chang, whose grandmother had taught Mrs. Chen a traditional Chinese song to include in the concert, stood before the school board with remarkable composure. "Mrs. Chen taught us that America is like a big song," she said in her small, clear voice. "Every person who comes here brings their own music, and when we sing together, it makes the most beautiful sound in the world. She taught us to be proud of where our families came from and proud to be Americans." Meanwhile, Mrs. Ling Chen sat in a police station interview room, still wearing her concert dress, still trying to process how her life had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. The interrogation had been brief, once officers realized the absurdity of the situation. But the damage was done. Her reputation, built over years of dedicated service, felt shattered. Her students, who trusted her to guide them through their musical journey, had seen her led away in handcuffs. "I keep thinking about their faces," she told her husband David when he finally arrived to pick her up. "They were so excited about tonight. They'd been practicing for months. And now, how do I face them? How do I explain that someone thought their beautiful music was dangerous?" The truth about Karen's motivations began to emerge the following day. Several parents came forward with stories of her increasingly aggressive behavior at school events. She had complained about the Spanish-language announcements at basketball games, objected to the Diwali celebration in the cafeteria, and most tellingly, had been overheard telling another parent that Mrs. Chen favored the foreign kids when Tyler hadn't been chosen for the solo. Dr. Sarah Williams, the school psychologist, had dealt with Karen multiple times over Tyler's academic struggles. "Karen has a pattern of externalizing blame," she explained to Principal Henderson. "When Tyler doesn't succeed, it's never because he needs to work harder or develop his skills. It's always because someone else is being unfair. Usually, someone she can characterize as other." Mrs. Chen became a target because she represents success that Karen can't control or claim for herself. The investigation into Karen's 911 call revealed the calculated nature of her actions. She had recorded several rehearsals on her phone, editing clips to remove context and make innocent cultural education appear sinister. She had taken notes on Mrs. Chen's explanations of different musical traditions, twisting them into evidence of anti-American propaganda. Most damning of all, she had coordinated with 2 other parents who shared her views, planning to overwhelm the school district with complaints if her initial call didn't achieve the desired result. When confronted with this evidence, Karen remained defiant. "I was protecting our children from foreign influence," she insisted during a meeting with school board members and district lawyers. "American children should learn American songs. They shouldn't be confused with all this multicultural nonsense. Mrs. Chen was undermining our values." "Mrs. Whitmore," Board President Janet Collins replied with icy precision, "Mrs. Chen was teaching American values. The values that built this country, welcoming immigrants, celebrating diversity, recognizing that our strength comes from our differences united under common principles. You've damaged a dedicated teacher, traumatized children, and wasted public resources with a false emergency call. Your actions are the antithesis of American values." The community's response was swift and decisive. A Facebook group called "We Stand with Mrs. Chen" grew to over 800 members in 48 hours. Local businesses offered to sponsor a rescheduled concert. The high school music department volunteered to provide additional accompaniment. Most powerful of all, families from across the district began sharing videos of their children singing the songs Mrs. Chen had taught them, showing the joy and pride the music had brought into their homes. Mrs. Chen was fully exonerated and reinstated within 72 hours. But the emotional wounds ran deep. She struggled to return to the music room where she had been humiliated, fought back tears every time she looked at the piano where she had been handcuffed. The children, too, carried scars from the incident. Several had nightmares about police taking their teacher away. Others became anxious about expressing pride in their heritage, afraid it might get them in trouble. It was little Emma Rodriguez who provided the turning point. 3 days after the incident, she approached Mrs. Chen after school with a handmade card covered in musical notes and drawn hearts. "Mrs. Chen," she said softly, "my mama told me that when people try to stop music, it means the music is too beautiful and it scares them. She said we should sing even louder." Mrs. Chen knelt down to Emma's level, feeling tears she had held back for days finally beginning to flow. "Your mama is very wise. Emma, music is powerful because it brings people together. Sometimes that frightens people who want to keep others apart." "Can we still have our concert?" Emma asked. "I want to sing our song about the world being wonderful. I want everyone to hear how beautiful it is when we all sing together." That afternoon, Mrs. Chen made a decision that would define her legacy at Maplewood Elementary. She would not only reschedule the concert, but she would expand it. The Harmony Around the World performance would become a celebration of educational diversity, a demonstration of the values that made American communities strong. The school board unanimously approved the plan and provided additional funding. The rescheduled concert was moved to the high school auditorium to accommodate the overwhelming community response. Local musicians volunteered to join the performance. The mayor agreed to provide opening remarks about the importance of cultural education. As the new concert date approached, Karen Whitmore found herself increasingly isolated. Her closest friends distanced themselves as the full scope of her deception became known. The PTA voted unanimously to revoke her membership. Several businesses that knew her refused to serve her family. Most painfully for Karen, her own son Tyler began asking difficult questions about why his mother had hurt his favorite teacher. "Why did you call the police on Mrs. Chen, Mom?" Tyler asked one evening at dinner. "She was helping me get better at singing. She said I had a nice voice and just needed more practice." "Why did you want to stop our concert?" Karen struggled to explain her actions to her 8-year-old son without admitting the jealousy and prejudice that had driven her behavior. I was worried that she wasn't teaching you the right things," she said lamely. "But she taught us that America is special because everyone can be American," Tyler replied with the clarity that only children possess. "She taught us that being different makes us stronger. That sounds right to me." The legal consequences for Karen began to mount as well. The district attorney's office filed charges for filing a false police report and public mischief. Mrs. Chen, supported by the teachers' union and several civil rights organizations, filed a lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress. The 911 call, now public record, had been played on news programs across the state, making Karen's face and voice synonymous with ignorance and prejudice. 1 week before the rescheduled concert, Karen received a certified letter from the school district's legal team, along with a formal cease and desist order preventing her from contacting Mrs. Chen or interfering with school activities. The letter contained an unusual proposal. The district would consider reduced legal action if Karen agreed to attend the concert and issue a public apology to Mrs. Chen and the students she had traumatized. They want me to humiliate myself in front of the entire community. Karen complained to her husband Mark, who had grown increasingly distant as the scandal unfolded. Karen, you humiliated yourself the moment you made that phone call. Mark replied wearily. You hurt innocent children. You destroyed a good teacher's reputation. You've made our family the laughingstock of the entire town. Maybe it's time to own up to what you've done and try to make it right. The night of the rescheduled concert arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe itself was blessing the event. The high school auditorium was packed beyond capacity, with overflow seating set up in the adjacent gymnasium with live video feed. Local news stations provided coverage, but this time, the story was about community resilience and the triumph of educational values over prejudice. Mrs. Chen stood backstage, watching her students adjust their costumes and warm up their voices. The past 3 weeks had been the most challenging of her teaching career, but seeing the excitement and determination in her students' faces reminded her why she had chosen this profession. They had not just recovered from the trauma of that terrible afternoon. They had grown stronger, more confident, more committed to their message of unity through diversity. Mrs. Chen, Principal Henderson approached with a clipboard and a concerned expression. Karen Whitmore is here. She's asked to speak with you before the performance begins. Mrs. Chen's stomach tightened, but she nodded. Let her come backstage. If she has something to say, she can say it in front of our students. They deserve to hear it. Karen appeared moments later, looking smaller somehow than she had during her campaign of harassment. Her usual confident demeanor had been replaced by nervous fidgeting and downcast eyes. Behind her trailed Tyler, who ran immediately to Mrs. Chen and wrapped his arms around her waist. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry my mom was mean to you, Tyler said, his voice muffled against her dress. I told her you're the best teacher and you never taught us anything bad. Mrs. Chen hugged Tyler back, looking over his head at Karen, who seemed to be fighting back tears. Your son is a wonderful boy, Karen. He has a beautiful voice and a kind heart. I hope you're proud of him. I need to apologize, Karen began, her voice barely above a whisper. What I did was wrong. I was angry about Tyler not getting the solo. And I let that anger turn into something ugly. I told myself I was protecting children, but I was really just trying to hurt you, because you made a decision I didn't like. 27 third graders had gathered around to listen, their young faces serious as they watched the woman who had caused so much pain struggle to find words for her actions. I made a mistake, Karen continued, her voice growing stronger as she looked directly at Mrs. Chen. A terrible mistake that hurt you and hurt these children. I was wrong about the songs you were teaching. I was wrong about your methods. I was wrong about everything. I let my own prejudices and jealousy blind me to the good work you were doing. Mrs. Chen studied Karen's face, searching for sincerity beneath the obvious discomfort. Apologies are important, Karen, but actions matter more than words. These children had their trust shattered. Their joy in making music was nearly destroyed. How do we move forward from here? I don't know, Karen admitted. I've made such a mess of everything. I've embarrassed my family, hurt innocent people, and damaged our community. I don't know how to fix what I've broken. Little Emma Rodriguez stepped forward, the same girl whose sobs had filled the music room 3 weeks earlier. Mrs. Chen taught us that music can heal things, she said to Karen. Maybe if you listen to our concert, you'll understand what we've been learning. Maybe you'll hear why our songs are beautiful instead of scary." Karen nodded, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I would like that very much. Emma, I'm sorry I scared you that day. I'm sorry I tried to stop your music." As the curtain rose on the rescheduled Harmony Around the World concert, 800 community members rose to their feet in thunderous applause. But the real ovation was for the children themselves, who had transformed their trauma into triumph, their confusion into clarity, their fear into fearless expression of joy. The concert began with Mrs. Chen at the piano, playing the opening notes of "This Land Is Your Land," the same song that had been interrupted by sirens and accusations 3 weeks earlier. But this time, the melody soared through the auditorium without interruption, carried by voices that had learned to sing louder in the face of those who would silence them. As the evening progressed, the audience was treated to musical traditions from around the world, each song preceded by a student explanation of its cultural significance and connection to American values. The Chinese lullaby that Lily Chang performed honored her grandmother's journey to America, seeking a better life. The Spanish folk song that Maria and her classmates sang celebrated the agricultural workers who helped feed the nation. The Hebrew melody taught the children about religious freedom and the Jewish community's contributions to American society. But it was Tyler Whitmore's solo performance that brought the house down. Mrs. Chen had arranged for him to sing "What a Wonderful World," the very song he had originally auditioned for. His clear, sweet voice filled the auditorium as he sang about seeing skies of blue and clouds of white, about friends shaking hands and saying, "How do you do?" His eyes found his mother in the audience as he reached the final verse about babies crying and growing, and the wonderful world they would inherit. When Tyler finished his solo, the silence lasted for a heartbeat before the entire auditorium erupted in sustained applause. Karen Whitmore stood with tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone, finally understanding what her son had tried to tell her about the beauty of Mrs. Chen's teaching. The concert concluded with all 27 students joining voices for "America the Beautiful," but Mrs. Chen had arranged the song in a way that incorporated musical elements from each of the cultures they had celebrated. The result was a version of the patriotic classic that truly embodied the diversity that made America beautiful, with harmonies that reflected the many voices that had contributed to the nation's chorus. As the final notes faded and the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes, Mrs. Chen stepped forward to address the community that had supported her through the darkest period of her career. 3 weeks ago, someone tried to silence the music in this room. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. They were afraid of songs that celebrated our differences, worried that learning about other cultures would somehow diminish our American identity. Tonight, these children have shown us the opposite. They've demonstrated that understanding where we come from makes us better at appreciating where we are. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces that included parents, teachers, community leaders, and yes, Karen Whitmore sitting in the back row with her family. Music education isn't about teaching children what to think, Mrs. Chen continued. It's about teaching them how to listen, how to find harmony with others, how to add their own voice to something larger than themselves. These children have learned that they can be proud of their heritage and proud to be Americans, because those two things aren't contradictory. They're complementary. The applause that followed was not just for Mrs. Chen, but for the values she represented and the courage she had shown in the face of prejudice and false accusations. Local news coverage that night focused not on the scandal that had nearly destroyed a teacher's career, but on the community that had rallied to defend educational excellence and cultural inclusion. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the incident and its resolution rippled through the Maplewood community in unexpected ways. The school district revised its policies to provide better protection for teachers against frivolous complaints, while also instituting mandatory cultural competency training for all staff and parent volunteers. Mrs. Chen was awarded the state's Excellence in Music Education Prize, with the selection committee specifically citing her courage in the face of adversity and commitment to fostering understanding through musical expression. Karen Whitmore faced the legal consequences of her actions, including a hefty fine for filing a false police report and a court-ordered requirement to perform community service with local immigrant assistance organizations. The civil lawsuit resulted in a settlement that funded new musical instruments for the school and established a scholarship for students from underrepresented communities to attend summer music camps. But perhaps the most significant change was in Karen herself. The community service work brought her into contact with families whose stories challenged her previous assumptions about immigration and cultural diversity. She began to understand that the foreign influences she had feared were actually threads in the rich tapestry that made American communities strong. 6 months after the concert, Karen approached Mrs. Chen with a different kind of request. Tyler had continued to flourish in the music program, and Karen wanted to volunteer as a parent helper for the spring musical production. The conversation was awkward at first, but Mrs. Chen recognized the genuine change in Karen's attitude and agreed to give her a chance to contribute positively to the program she had once tried to destroy. The spring musical was a production of It's a Small World, chosen specifically for its message about global unity and understanding. Karen worked behind the scenes, helping with costumes and props, listening to children from dozens of different backgrounds share their excitement about representing their cultures on stage. The experience completed her transformation from someone who saw diversity as a threat to someone who recognized it as a gift. On opening night of the spring musical, as Karen watched Tyler perform alongside classmates whose families had come from every corner of the world, she finally understood what Mrs. Chen had been teaching all along. America's strength didn't come from uniformity, but from the beautiful harmony that emerged when different voices learned to sing together. The story of Maplewood Elementary's Harmony Around the World concert became a case study in education schools across the country, used to teach future teachers about the importance of defending inclusive education practices and building community support for cultural learning. Mrs. Chen was invited to speak at conferences about maintaining educational integrity in the face of political pressure, while her students' performance videos were viewed millions of times online, spreading their message of unity through diversity far beyond their small community. Years later, when those 27 third graders had grown into teenagers and young adults, they would still remember the day their music was silenced and the way their community came together to make it louder than ever before. They learned that their voices mattered, that their cultures were valuable, and that standing up for what's right sometimes requires singing when others try to make you silent. Mrs. Chen continued teaching at Maplewood Elementary for many more years, inspiring thousands of students to find their voices and use them to build bridges rather than walls. Her music room became a pilgrimage site for educators who wanted to see how cultural education could strengthen rather than threaten community values. The photographs on her walls grew to include pictures from dozens of concerts. But the Harmony Around the World performance held a special place of honor, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from surviving the silence and choosing to sing anyway. In the end, what Karen Whitmore had intended as an act of division became the catalyst for unprecedented unity in the Maplewood community. Her false accusation, born of prejudice and jealousy, had backfired spectacularly, creating a stronger, more inclusive environment than had existed before. The children she had tried to protect from foreign influence became ambassadors for the very values that made America great: tolerance, diversity, opportunity, and the belief that everyone has something valuable to contribute to the American song. The music room at Maplewood Elementary still echoes with the voices of children learning that their differences make them stronger together, that their heritage enriches rather than threatens their American identity, and that when voices unite in harmony, they create something more beautiful than any single note could ever be alone. And somewhere in that chorus, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the ghost of sirens that once tried to silence the song, now transformed into just another part of the music. A reminder that even the darkest moments can become part of a beautiful symphony when a community chooses love over fear, understanding over ignorance, and harmony over discord.